Very happy to be here with you. I hope most of us can join us live here today. Apart from the circumstance that brings us all together here today, I am again very pleased to have you with us today, and wanted to introduce our webinar series to you, a very timely webinar series we've put together here at LeggUP. I am Petra Rassel, the head of coaching at LeggUP. We are a professional development platform specializing in helping organizations transforming through development of their leaders and employees of coaching. And we have prepared our first one here for today as our series from Thriving from Home, with the start of the series being Navigating Change. We are looking forward to have you join us over the next several weeks on the remaining parts of the series. It's a 6-part series, and we will explore topics such as resilience, mastering focus, true empowerment, learning agility, and team mindset, as they pertain to how you can set yourself up for success while working from home. It is my true pleasure to introduce today one of our LeggUP coaches and experts on this topic, Terry McDougall. She will lead you through this first series today. Terry is an executive coach. Again, she's one of our expert coaches on the LeggUP Coach Community panel. In addition, she is a speaker and best-selling author. Her book is Winning the Game of Work: Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. She works with high-achieving professionals to help them live and work at the intersection of personal meaning and professional achievement so they can and their organizations thrive. Very timely today, and we're very happy to have you here today with us, Terry. Without much further ado, I want to pass this on to you and have you introduce to us the Thriving from Home series and Navigating Change.
Well, thanks, Petra. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm thrilled to be able to share this very timely content with you today. So I'm going to share my screen and get the PowerPoint up and started. So this is a framework for leading change. So as we all know, change can be complex and it can be confusing, as we are all experiencing right now with the coronavirus and the results of what's happening with that in our lives and in our careers. So what I'm going to share today is a framework that was actually developed for leading effective organizational change. However, it's very timely and relevant at the individual level as well. Because in order for change to be effective, it really needs to be addressed on 3 levels: at the individual, how it pertains to others, and then finally how it happens within an organization. And in reality, all change needs to happen at the individual level. So as we all know, with change comes uncertainty, and with uncertainty comes risk, and humans are basically hardwired to resist risk and uncertainty. So when there's change, there's risk. And so in order to increase the acceptance of change, whether it's with ourselves or people that we're trying to influence, we need to reduce risk and uncertainty. And this model that I'm going to share with you today gives you a really great framework to think about how to do that. So with that, I'm going to introduce what's called the ADKAR change management model. This was developed by an organization called ProSci that studies and consults on change management at the enterprise level. But as I mentioned, even for large enterprises, change actually happens at the individual level. And this model empowers leaders and change management teams to focus on their activities on what will collectively drive individual change and produce organizational results. So the goal or outcomes defined by the ADKAR model are sequential and cumulative. And what I mean by that is if, for example, a change needs to happen with either individuals or an organization and the earlier milestones aren't addressed, what you're going to find is that you run into resistance. So they must be achieved in order, and for change to be implemented and sustained, an individual must progress through each one of these milestones, starting with awareness. And so with awareness, it's really understanding what needs to change. Why do we need this change? Who is it going to impact? When is it going to happen? And then people need to understand, why should I want to change? What's in it for me? And then once they have accepted that, okay, yes, there is a change that needs to happen, and now I understand why I should change. And if, what I'd like to do is just take a moment and think back for myself, back to the beginning of March when we were, it's hard to believe that we weren't all very aware of coronavirus, because we certainly are now, but, it was just sort of buzzing around in the background back then. You were hearing about, infections in China and so forth, but it didn't seem like it was something that I really needed to pay much attention to. But as time went on, I began to realize, like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should be, washing my hands more because this could be a deadly infection. And then you start to think like, well, why should I change and start working from home and keeping my kids in and not allowing them to interact with others? Well, you start to realize, well, I want to do this because this is a very serious infection and I don't want someone in my family to get it. So what's in it for me to keep people in the house is saving them from being infected. So then we go on to the next level, which is, okay, the knowledge of how to change. What do we need to do in order to put this change into place? And for many of us who are, I actually have my own business, so I work from home all of the time, but for many people who maybe are usually in the office, this has meant that they've had to learn how to work from home. So maybe get remote access to their company computers, and that can be hard, right? Because we're changing. We have to understand what we need to do. And then we need to understand, to get the skills and the behavior how to do it. So for many people, maybe they haven't really used Zoom a lot, or haven't had to access files remotely from work. So there's practice and there's, maybe knowledge that needs to come along with that. And then finally, in order for change to stick, we need to have it reinforced. Some of the things that I think are very helpful about this model is that when there is resistance, either with individuals or within an organization, you can use this framework as a lens to look at the types of resistance you're getting, to diagnose where do we need to go back and address. Are people not aware of why we need to make the change? Or is it really more that they need some, maybe some tools to teach them, maybe a step-by-step training to teach them how to do some of the things they need to do in this time of change? Or is it really just a reminder that they need to reinforce the behaviors? This can be very helpful for, like I said, individuals or for leaders in designing how to implement change. So next, I'd like to go through the 5 milestones in a little bit more depth. So at the awareness level, you need to answer the questions, what is the change? Why are we going through this change? Where will it impact? Who will it impact? How will it impact us? And then secondly, at the desire milestone, what's the benefit to me of accepting this change? You have to make it relevant to the people that you're expecting to make the change. And then once people have understand why they need to do it and what it is, and they're on board with making the change, the next thing that needs to really be addressed is, what do I need to know? I'm ready to change, but what do I need to know to make the change? And then once they have the knowledge, what are the skills and tools that they need to make the change at the ability milestone. And then I think that probably one of the most important phases is reinforcement. How do you make this a habit? Because we can tell people what they need to do, but if things aren't reinforced, and then people go back to, change is hard, right? We've got neural pathways that have been built over time in how we do things. And if we don't reinforce it, and then it can have an impact on whether the change is accepted or not. So at this point, what we'd like to do is just pause and ask, where do you feel like you are on this continuum in terms of the milestone that you're at in accepting and integrating change that's been brought on by, maybe working at home or some of the changes you've had to face due to the coronavirus lockdown?
Yeah, Terry, I think we all probably, as you went through this, found ourselves in several different phases here. And maybe to also point out, of course, this is a change that happened to all of us pretty much at the same time, with some delay if you think about it globally. But definitely something that we had trickled down to the individual level pretty quickly. And as we all find ourselves, including all our LeggUP team now working remote from home, a lot of things that we couldn't imagine beforehand, right? Out of a sudden, we're not home alone in quiet and peacefulness. We're sitting on top of each other, and there's a lot of noise, distraction, and other things going on, and it's chaotic at times, and it keeps us from probably having the focus and the productivity that we're used to. And we're getting frustrated over a few things. And it's very easy in this whole situation to really start focusing in on the negative aspects that hit us through this change. And I think that to the point how our brain works when we are hit up by change versus initiating change on our end, we feel a little bit overwhelmed and quickly powerless or out of control. And that's where the resistance probably kicks in, and the brain goes like, hey, I don't want this, right? I'm not enjoying this. I don't like this. And I like better what I had. And now there's this phase. So that's why I'm saying you probably find yourselves in various landing places here throughout those 5 stages. Where's the space where you can regroup and really start shifting your lens, right? And looking at things from maybe a more positive or more opportunistic perspective. Thank you for putting the poll out right away. I hope we already see some responses. Let me see here.
I can go ahead and share those if you'd like.
Yeah. Okay, most of us are in the reinforcement or ability stage. Is that surprising to you, Terry, having more experience on this particular model? Is that where typically you find people in the beginning phases of change initiatives?
Well, I think it really depends on what the change is and whether people are buying into it and they see a need for it. But I think that nowadays, a lot of people have had experience working from home. A lot of companies have allowed it. And I know I went pretty quickly from thinking like, is this really that serious to, once I read about people who had the coronavirus, I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll endure the pain of trying to keep my, teenage and early 20s kids in the house, even though they're complaining about it, because obviously I don't want them to get sick because it could be really deadly. So the desire and knowledge have been overcome through the reading that I've done. And now it's just really practicing some of the skills, right? Practicing using the tools and then reinforcing it. So I'm not super surprised about this. I wanted to just touch on, before I go on to the next slide, one of the things that you had said about, the opportunity versus sometimes the way that we can face stress or face change. It can be very stressful. Sometimes we feel like it's it's been just sort of hoisted upon us and we don't have a choice. And certainly that's kind of the case right now. I mean, this has had a huge impact on how we're living and working today. And we can look at that and say, you know, feel like, oh, I'm a victim, or be very angry about it, or just sort of, you know, begrudgingly tolerate what's going on. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is, you know, how do we, you know, take it up a level and say, how can we help other people who maybe have it worse than we do? Or I've also been thinking about how this may fast forward some things from a use of technology standpoint. Like once companies have gotten used to having employees work from home out of necessity, it may actually give us more flexibility going forward, so that, you know, say for example, if our kids are out of school sick, that they can do distance learning and not miss the opportunity to be learning. Or from a work standpoint, that we, you know, if we've got something going on, we may not need to take a day off from work, that we can work from home without really things changing that much. And sometimes, you know, it can take a crisis to get us to a point more quickly than we would have otherwise. So, yeah.
Another point I thought about when I thought the majority of it landed in the ability and reinforcement stages, do I have the skills and tools I need, right? It's sometimes also coming down at what can I control to set myself up for success, and then also, do I ask things I need, right? And how do I connect with the right people to help me set myself up to be successful and productive with what I'm doing? And how do I ask? How do we communicate with each other? How do we collaborate, right? And how do we get comfortable with this new way of connecting and collaborating, and knowing that we're all in this together, in a sense of we're all not right away perfect at it, and we're all kind of trying to, you know, figure out, okay, do I need a noise canceling headset now because I'm having distractions around that I previously didn't have, right? But to kick that creative thinking back into gear and get that higher brain working versus the one that's worried and trying to figure out, you know, how do I just, you know, overcome all these obstacles that I have right in front of me. It's really the thinking and the idea of, you know, how do I get out of that little bubble of self-preservation and really look at it from a broader perspective and see the opportunity again, not just me to develop in a new direction, but also for my organization, right? How do we as an organization grow into sustainably moving forward, given that circumstance that we're all in, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it actually takes, you know, when you're seeing the opportunity, or you're reaching out and helping and caring for other people, that actually can increase the amount of energy that you have in your life versus, you know, being in that hypervigilant mode and feeling threatened by the change. And, you know, that can really lead to a lot of stress and burnout. Whereas if you can elevate it, relax a little bit, put the things in place that you need to accept the change, that it's less stressful ultimately.
Yes, and maybe also I'm touching on, of course, our specialty here at LeggUP, which is coaching, and coaching as a tool to really reflect, right? And I think that's the time that we sometimes don't give ourselves, or it's a little difficult sometimes for ourselves without the help of a coach to see that pencil behind your head, right? If someone moves it towards you and in front of you, you see it. If it's behind you, of course, you can't see it. But it's really this idea of, you know, how do we all approach this and come from a place of, again, what's really in there that's positive and that can instill that sense of personal why again, right? Why am I doing this, and why is this important, and where are the positive aspects of it, rather than, you know, really getting caught up in what's completely understandable is that overwhelm and concern and void that we all have in moments like that, right? Validating, acknowledging it's totally normal that this feels chaotic and it feels uncomfortable. And it takes, you know, sometimes a little support and someone that not just acknowledges and validates what's going on for you, but also, you know, helps you to look at the resources within, right? for us to be, again, creative and resourceful in those moments is really the key to setting ourselves up for continued success. And that's where I always see relationships become so valuable and so unique. I think this is such a wonderful way to partner and really see there's more that I have, and it's more that I can offer, not just to myself, but also to others, right, in those moments.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this, and, Petra, I know that you and I can relate on this, is that this actually is also the model that individuals go through in a coaching situation, right? It's in order for any change to take place, it has to begin with awareness, and then it's just really going through all these phases till you get to the point that you're reinforcing the desired change and making it into a habit. So I think that's probably why this really resonated with me, because it aligns with what I do every day for a living. Well, with that, I'd like to go on and just kind of dig even a little bit deeper into, let's see here. Trying to advance the slides. There we go. Oh, sorry. No, I wanted to go into, when there are issues that need to be addressed at each milestone. And when we're looking at creating awareness, what's very important at this level is communication. If it's within an organization, it's sponsorship. So who's asking you to make the change? If it's a big change in a large organization, it's always helpful if senior leaders step up and really sponsor the change. And then, of course, as people are going through the change, having coaching at the leadership level or with other coworkers that maybe have stepped in to be a change management lead. And then, of course, access to information. That's critical. And when we see resistance at the awareness stage, this is usually, you hear people saying things like, this is a waste of time, or things were working fine before, or they never tell us what's going on. It's natural to feel sort of helpless when there's not enough information shared, or when it feels like you're the only one that's being asked to make the change and that other people aren't. So that's why information and sponsorship and communication is really critical at the awareness stage. Go ahead.
It's all reliant on information that none of us really have at any level. So it's just really this uncertainty, and how do we lead through that, right? It's really this, what do I have to offer in terms that have really me through some of other challenging scenarios in the past, and really, capture that and what that felt like, when I was able to overcome something and use this frame of reference and inspire self and others, in terms of, we can get through this together. It's easier said than done, right? It's always a question of, and how much do I believe this?
Yeah.
Right. But again, it's really, this is so important that we look at things from an awareness level and from a readiness level, from a mindset perspective, right? To engage in this change process and say, this is what we're in together, right? And what we can do now is there's a lot of opportunity to shape this and create something with this. And that in itself gives you back some power and control over a scenario, like I said, that has us all with a reasonable amount of uncertainty. And it's probably going to be that way, right, in the coming days and perhaps weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the awareness stage, it's also really critical to have it be a dialogue. So if, as leaders, a lot of times we can think like, oh, well, I've answered all of the questions that anyone would have. But sometimes, we may have blind spots, and it's good to have that dialogue. So if someone has a question, as a leader, you can take that in and realize like, oh, this is an aspect that people are concerned with that I didn't address. And,
yes.
Certainly we've seen that with a lot of the leaders in the country or at the state level, getting the information out there, or, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's talking a lot about the coronavirus. I mean, he's providing a lot of information that people need to know to be aware of the seriousness of the change that's required currently. So going on to the desire, at this point, it's really, at this stage in the desire milestone, it's important to, again, to have that visible sponsorship. You know, when people know that leaders are saying, you know, like in my state, I'm in Illinois, the governor has basically put a lockdown on the state. Like you really can only go out of your house for critical activities, to, you know, food shopping or to the pharmacy, or, you know, there's certain
essentials. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like if we didn't have that type of sponsorship here, somebody standing up and saying, this is what's expected, and then, you know, more of us would be going out because we might not think it's as big of a deal. It's also really important to equip managers to lead change, and then to assess the risk and anticipate resistance that might come up. You know, as people say, you know, it's painful not to be able to go out and do the things we're used to doing. And so if we anticipate what people's resistance might be, we can counter it with information. And then I think it's always important to involve people in change and align the incentives. So,
and maybe even turn that, you know, initially that resistance into, you know, where's the opportunity here, right? That makes this a more rewarding exercise in a sense, right? How do you see what you now are asked to do is really something that supports the greater good, right? As you'd mentioned before, it will prevent, you know, people spreading, you know, by just exposing themselves and maybe exposing through themselves others, and really understanding if we do this together and you know, help each other out, the result out of it is beneficial to not just self, the greater good. And I think that in is the reward experience, and can turn some of these, you know, initially resisting experience or resistance that shows up in various forms into something that's actually creating something that's worth striving for and being in for together, right? So it's really always, again, shifting that ends, right, in these critical moments. And I think a lot of it is really the communication and the touch point, right, people need. And I think with us all being remote and losing a little bit that connectivity that we probably enjoy usually, even in the workplace, we find these chance encounters, right, to come together quickly, you know, huddle somewhere and have a moment to where we create things together. We got to find ways to still make that happen, right? And in creating that in a new way, for us at LeggUP, we even managed to create a virtual happy hour on Friday evenings, our Friday afternoons. And it's fun. We found out of a sudden you have technology shine, right? Like it never has before. I mean, we're creating backgrounds and we're creating an atmosphere, and yeah, we're all you know, happy to do that in our office and really be together. But this is fine. You know, if you think about what you're still creating, it connects us, and it offers space to talk about whatever we want to talk about at the end of the week. And we're sitting there and having a beverage, and still there is connection, there is support in a lot of ways, right? How do we create that in these moments? And I think, again, there's so much opportunity to really shape that for us and make that a fun experience, that we really have time now to really think through and say, hey, you know, what can I do to make this a little nicer for everyone involved?
Yeah, definitely. You know, one of I want to point out, like, what you might see if there's resistance around the desire. And what you might hear is people saying, well, I'm not really interested in changing, or what's in it for me? I doubt that they're really serious about this. I mean, we saw some of, it's interesting. I don't know how many people saw the spring breakers like a week ago or so, where they were like, oh, if I get coronavirus, I get it. Well, you know, now one of the people that was really prominently featured on some of the video that was shot down in Florida has come back out and said that, you know, he's sorry for doing that. So, you know, obviously at the point that he was taking off for Florida for spring break, you know, he didn't have a desire to change. But as time has gone on and this person's learned more about how serious it is, you know, he's gotten through that desire phase. Obviously, he doesn't want, you know, his more older family members to be infected. So
Yeah.
going on to the next milestone, how to build knowledge, it's important to, you know, assess the current level of knowledge, understand people's capability to learn, to provide learning resources, and determine the tactics based on the needs. You know, I think, again, if you look at, say, college students versus, you know, maybe people who have families, like I had, you know, I feel like one of my big responsibilities in life is keeping my family safe. So I was really reading up on this maybe a little bit earlier than, you know, a 21-year-old kid in college would do. So you just think about, like, who am I trying to influence and how do I do that? What are the appropriate tactics? Sometimes we see mistakes that are made at the knowledge level when people try to skip to, say, the training without addressing awareness and desire first. You know, so if somebody's saying, well, here's all of the things that you should do to keep yourself safe from coronavirus. Well, people don't even know what it is, and they don't know, you know, I think that we've seen a lot of younger, healthy people say, well, it's not a big deal because it's not going to impact me. I'm healthy and I'll get over it quickly. But when people were made to realize that even if you don't get sick, you could become a carrier and it could impact people in your family. And then all of a sudden that desire goes up to make the change because, you know, we don't want to infect our loved ones, even if we don't get sick. So the next milestone is around ability, and it's really about involving subject matter experts and giving people the ability to practice the skills and the behaviors that they need, and for them to be able to adopt these without there being any negative consequences, like that as they're learning the skills, that nobody's standing over their shoulder and saying, you're doing that wrong. You know, a safe place to be able to practice is really critical.
Well, and I think that's actually, again, one of those things that's easier said than done, right? So we're having a lot of challenges that we're facing, and then there's oftentimes we put ourselves, you know, under pressure and trying to basically be at a production level that is really not realistic in terms of how we set expectations sometimes. So with something new, I think we also have to treat ourselves with kindness and some passion and give ourselves some slack in terms of growing into this, you know, in a reasonable manner. There's going to be some experimenting, right? Some will work out better than some other things. Some of our first virtual get-togethers may not be as perfect as we would like them to be, right? So we're having to really be able and not lose our ability to still play a little bit and learn as we do, because that's really going on, right? We're constantly learning as we're doing. There's going to be some stuff that's going to be more successful than others. And as long as we're applying what we're learning in the process, right, it's rewarding experience. And I think that's, again, how do we set ourselves up for success here, right, in this process?
Yeah.
I think it really has to do with expectations and setting, you know, up, knowing what's expected, particularly in your job, right? I mean, now I'm remote, right? What does this need to look like for me to meet expectations? Have I asked? Do I know, back to knowledge, right, what's expected of me? And then do I know how to set myself up to meet those expectations, right? And what's really in my way currently that's stopping me to step on the gas and really get there, right? So there's so much going on in all our lives right now. And I think it's beautiful to see how this really kind of can be, you know, mapped out in these 5 things. You really can say, okay, I'm right here. So apparently I need a little bit more of that and a little less of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the point that you're making is so critical, right? That we can sometimes be in a new situation like this, like trying to work from home, but then you've got your kids home and your dog, and, you know, you don't have maybe that physical separation of home and work. And we may continue to expect the exact same amount of production out of ourselves when we're getting used to, you know, this new ability to do things. So, you know, maybe we're trying to do our job, but we're also trying to figure out the technology, or we're trying to block out, like, okay, how do I do this? How do I, you know, take care of my kids and, you know, I think we were talking yesterday, Petra, when we were preparing for this, about how sometimes we might need to say, okay, well, what do I need to be able to perform in this? Do I need noise canceling, you know, headphones? If I don't have a separate office and my kids are in there watching cartoons, how do I get the, you know, the quiet and the focus that I need to do my job in a productive way? How do I separate myself? You know, how do I separate my home life from my work life when, you know, there's not any kind of physical separation? So
Terry, we actually have a question here. Looks like really for an organization to think around what are the top 3 or 4 or 5 recommendations you would have to keep teams engaged. So here's an actual question from, I believe, one of our organizational leaders in the audience. How do I keep my team engaged? What are your top 3, 4, 5 recommendations, again, in relationship to this model that we're discussing here?
I think my top 3 would be communicate, communicate, communicate. Really, because you don't really know where people are unless you're asking them. And I think that, you know, the reason why I'm sharing what resistance looks like at each one of these levels is that if you're reaching out to people and you're saying, how's it going? And they're saying, you know, it's a waste of time. Things were working fine before, you know, that they're having issues at the awareness level. So you can go there and you can maybe reinforce, like, okay, well, I'm going to you know, go over this again about why or what's expected. If, you know, if they're saying, you know, I eventually get there, but this is just taking me twice as long as it usually does, you know that they're getting used to using the new skills at the ability level. So if you're asking, you take the input that you're getting back, and then you can use this framework to look at the input that you're getting, and you can diagnose what you need to go back and reinforce from these 5 milestones. So
communication, and of course reinforcement as it pertains to follow-up, right? So there is frequent follow-up, particularly in those early phases. How are things working for you, right? How do we again follow up on how people are really doing? And that is a challenge for, you know, if you think about organizations with hundreds and thousands of employees. And again, we've really noticed here with what we're doing at LeggUP that being able to scale this approach, particularly through with the coaching partnerships, to really touch people and really connect with them on a regular basis and really see how they're doing, right? And
yes.
I offer almost in some cases a sounding board for them to just you know, feel heard, and this is what I'm struggling with, and here's my challenges, and then redirect that right in the session to okay, so you want about it, right? And really inspire that, taking control back, taking power back, and again turning that creative thinking back on, versus the you know, small awareness around, you know, the struggle and the problems, and the problem focused mindset versus the solution focused mindset.
I think that another thing that's really critical to take into consideration is that, you know, if there's a certain amount of productivity that's expected, that it may make sense to dial that back slightly and recognize that change and learning new things takes a lot of energy. And if people are feeling a lot of stress to keep up the same level of productivity that they had in the office, plus learn on top of that, what you might end up seeing is that people are just shut down, that they're burning out and they're not able to do it because there's not been a recognition that, you know, part of the energy that they would normally have to, you know, be productive in the office is now being used for them to learn these new skills. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I think acknowledging that and doing as much as you can to support people as they're getting to the point where, okay, now I have the ability and I've, you know, now I understand how to do this and it's become a new habit. You know, I think very high levels of support during this are really critical if you want the change to happen successfully.
Yeah, and I think also something we touched on before, perhaps again here, is setting realistic expectations, right? Setting people up for success in
Yes.
terms of they can meet these expectations given circumstances and really experience to be successful rather than seeing themselves fail every day.
Yeah.
And further discouraged, right? I think that's very important as well.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of positive reinforcement. Again, I really need to be mindful of in those challenges is that our brain kicks into this negative context, and everything that's perceived as challenging, threatening, negative kicks our lower brain. And as I like to say, right, we're really finding proof for that because our brain starts scanning for it, right? And feels like we're looking for proof that things are not working and we're not going to be successful here. And we're finding reasons everywhere of why we can't versus really, again, looking at the opportunities and finding ways of how we can.
Yeah, you know, one of the sayings I love is confidence is the expectation of a positive outcome. And when we're going through change like this, we've never been through it. And so we don't necessarily expect a positive outcome. We become fearful. Like you mentioned, we're scanning the environment for threats. That takes energy and it takes it away from us being able to focus on maybe what the activity is that we need to be focused on for work. And so as leaders, and even when I say leaders, I think even like self-leadership, if we recognize what our needs are and we address them, that's going to help us feel more confident about a positive outcome, and it will enable us to reduce the amount of energy that we're using scanning the environment for threats, and it'll allow us to free that energy to focus on more productive activity.
So we have another question here.
Okay.
Actually, that's something that I'm sure many resonates with many. We have Summer Murray here saying, I struggle with the guilt of not being as productive in a traditional work day when I'm now home versus in the office. What type of expectations do I have for myself, and what expectations can I communicate to my team?
You know, that actually aligns very beautifully with the ability milestone, because you know, I think that a lot of high achievers, you know, and I'm among them, use guilt as a motivator. You know, it's like, oh, I should be doing more. But I think that you have to recognize that these are extraordinary circumstances, and you are, you know, it's not business as usual. You're having to learn new skills as you're doing this, and give yourself some grace. You know, I think should is a very heavy word. And I think that if I tell my coaching clients this all the time when I hear them saying, well, I should do this and I should do that. It's really, that's self-judgment. And if you say, well, I'm choosing to do this, and it might be that you say, well, I'm choosing to learn how to use the tools better. So I'm going slow right now so I can go fast later. But if you put the weight on yourself of these, you know, expectations as if it's business as usual, which by the way, it's not, you're actually going to slow yourself down because you're you know, feeling the pressure of performing at the same time that you're needing to learn new ways of doing things. And I would say that, you know, for yourself and also for your team, to just give yourself and your team a little bit of grace. Understand that these are extraordinary circumstances, and it's okay to not know how to do everything perfectly. It's okay to recognize that, you know, we're in this environment where it's uncertain and there's fear. It's actually going to you know, distract us a little bit from what our, you know, best normal performance would be. you know, I think that I just want to read a couple of the things that can come up for people if there's resistance at the ability level. And that's, you know, I'm not getting these new steps right, you know, like where we feel pressure, or, you know, we judge ourselves where we say, well, I eventually get there, but it takes me twice as long as it normally would. Or, you know, I understand the instructions, but when I do it, when I have to do it on my own, I freeze. I don't know how to do this. Well, that's okay. It's natural. I think what can happen a lot of times with adults is that, you know, we've mastered a lot in our lives and we forget what it was like back when we were younger and we were having to learn things for the first time. And, you know, when you recognize that it takes more energy to learn new things, and it takes more energy to, you know, remember like, oh yeah, this is the way I'm supposed to be doing this now since I'm working from home. You know, again, just give yourself grace during this time and recognize that, you know, if we didn't have access to, say, the, you know, technology to work from home, that we wouldn't be doing anything. So some productivity is better than no productivity. And if you will give yourself grace so that you are not also pressuring yourself to perform at what would normally be your level of productivity, you're actually going to have more energy to put into your work. So maybe you're working at 85% instead of 110%. That's better than if you're worried and you're only at 75%.
Yeah. I actually, and I like that. I mean, specifically as it pertains again to where we start with expectations, right? So it's really setting, leading is as we self first before others, right? And setting the right expectations for self. And again, setting yourself up for success is a lot about how you role model that for team members, right? Even in a
absolutely.
And how you develop empathy and come across authentic, right? I haven't figured this out 100%. How could have anyone figured this out in a day or two, right?
Right.
It takes all of us a certain amount of time, and some of us adapt faster, right? Struggle a little bit longer with just overcoming that initial maybe fear and worry that started to come on when the panic kicked in, right? And I think that when we look at where we really had the most rewarding learning experiences, always by role models that impressed us, right? By really seeing someone else doing something, and we went like, wow, you know, this is how I would like to show up, right? And so again, it's an unbelievable inspiration for all of us to really say, how can I show up better for others, right? And in that really improve how you support self in that situation as well, right? We got another one here coming in, Sandeep Kulkarni. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Do you see remote learning in one of the top, as one of the top concerns, probably, an opportunity in this challenging time?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Do you see remote learning is one of the top concerns and opportunities in this challenging time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great opportunity. And of course it is a bit of a challenge too, because I think that it's, there's certain energy when you're in a classroom with people, when it's in person, right? That there's not the distractions. But on the other hand, I think that given the challenges of the current environment and the skills that we need to learn and get up to speed pretty quickly on, being able to connect remotely is it's a great opportunity. And like I was saying earlier, I think that for many people that maybe didn't have the chance, or you know, weren't allowed to work from home or whatever previously, that I think that it's an opportunity to fast forward this so that it's a more normal way of doing things in the future. And you know, there's a lot of advantages to remote learning, right? It's less expensive. You can involve more people. It can be recorded so people can watch it at their leisure. So I think that there are a lot more opportunities, and I think that this is going to help it become more mainstream.
And I think when I just think about how we approach the learning at LeggUP, and of course you as one of our coaches, you're very familiar with the concept of really combining that one-directional learning, which is which is the traditional sense of online learning, right? Or remote learning, with really the connectivity that we create with the coaching still, right? So you have a two-way learning experience, right, a reflective learning experience, yes, and in the combination likes the strength and the success rate that we're seeing with it, right? So I think it's a tremendous, yes, opportunity. And as you said, it's a challenge because we all got to get better with technology and embracing, you know, how it's bringing the content to us. I think it's wonderful that we can bring that human factor back into learning through coaching that way, and, yeah, and have that as part of the equation, because I think it's invaluable, and it makes a huge difference in terms of what we absorb and how we bring that forward, right?
Yes, and you know, that's a fantastic segue to the last milestone here, which is around reinforcement. Yeah. And you know, when we're trying to reinforce change, whether it's with ourselves or with others, it's important to provide meaningful incentives. And part of that could be, you know, that grace, or saying to yourself, like, okay, I'm going to, you know, I had a hard day today, so I'm going to, you know, have a bowl of ice cream once I've gotten off of this, or I'm going to, you know, if you're trying to incentivize your kids to be quiet while you're on a conference call, maybe, yeah, you say to them that, you know, they will be able to watch a special TV show, or they'll get a snack after dinner, whatever it is. But make sure that you recognize the progress that you and others are making and acknowledge it. You know, I think to that question earlier about, you know, feeling guilty, you know, if you acknowledge that you are changing and you are having to learn new ways of doing things, and you celebrate, okay, like, yay, I was able to log on to Zoom today without, yeah, any issues, so, you know, mm-hmm, like, give yourself a pat on the back. You've learned something new. And also, if you can, try not to have negative consequences. So again, going back to that, like, if you can, try not to feel guilty. You know, think about, and I actually will do this with a lot of my clients, because I think with high achievers, a lot of times we're really hard on ourselves, but we may be very kind to other people. So start to think about, if I were trying to encourage my children or a friend or, you know, another loved one to do something they've never done before, how would I talk to them? If you can think about that, start talking to yourself that way. Say, like, hey, you did it better this time than last time. That's right. Or, yeah, you got more done today than you got done yesterday because you're getting used to this. If you need accountability, reach out to people and ask them to hold you accountable for you know, for practicing. So I think that one of the biggest mistakes in this milestone is stopping the accountability and incentives before the habits are established. You know, because if we, and this can mean for your staffs, I think this goes back to the question that was asked earlier too, about how do you, you know, continue to, you know, encourage your staff. Well, if you are expecting certain types of behavior, and then maybe keep checking in to make sure that they understand that, yes, I want you to do this on an ongoing basis, and not like, okay, you did it once and now you're going to go back to the way that you used to do things. And that's, you know, that is something that happens a lot of times when people are trying to make a change, you know. And if you think about things, yeah, like exercising or, you know, going on a diet, that like people are really good for the first week, right? And then they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. But if you really want to have the lasting change, it's got to be consistent. And so whatever you need to do for yourself, yeah, or your team, to keep reminding them, like, yeah, you got to keep this up. And if somebody backslides and they, you know, say they dial into the conference line instead of getting on Zoom, if that's your expectation, you know, remind them, like, I really would like to be able to see you when we have this meeting. So can you, you know, and if you're having any trouble with it, like, let me know, or call the help desk or whatever. Yeah. So I know we're getting close to the end, so I want to make sure that we make it, yeah, through the slides here.
And this is always, when we get into this, we can always keep.
I know. Right? I want to have some respect for everybody's time. So here's some of the takeaways. Take action to get what you need. This will help you feel more in control. So it's, you know, rather than complaining that it's hard to hear, or that, you know, whatever it is, whatever it is that you need, get on Amazon and order some noise canceling headphones.
Yes.
If, whatever it is, take control of it. You'll feel better. If you're doing okay, reach out to others to see how you might be able to help them. There's more energy in that. And a lot of times we feel better, even if it feels like sort of like a helpless situation that we're, isolated, or we're uncomfortable and working the way that we are. Sometimes when you reach out to others and you can help them, there's a spark of energy that comes out of that. It just feels good. Keep a healthy perspective. This is not forever. It's going to be like a lot of other monumental historic times. At some point, we'll look back and say, oh yeah, I remember 9/11. I remember the financial meltdown. These were big, huge, monumental things in my career, but we got through them, and things changed, and we got used to it. And then get creative. I love the example that you shared, Petra, about the virtual happy hours, right? There's a lot of advantages to that, right? It's cheaper than going to the bars, and you don't have to drink and drive.
Yeah, nobody has to
worry
about driving and drinking.
Right.
Yep.
And
it
Petra,
can be a tea hour, or it can be a coffee
exactly.
hour, whatever that may be.
Yeah, stories, whatever. You want to go over the last three, Petra?
Of course. So, recognize opportunities. I think that's always, of course, what we're trying to get at with the reflective thing, right? Where are the opportunities here? And never underestimate. I like the point you made earlier, celebrate your small wins, right? There are so many chances to create highlights throughout the day in how we interact now, how we connect now, and acknowledge that as a positive experience for what it is. Don't minimize it because it's not looking like what you experienced before, or what your usual measure was for that. And stay present. I think that's a huge, right? We're trying to plan ahead, and we like certainty, and we like control, and at this moment, we got to stay in the moment and really acknowledge and be okay with this is far we can see right now, right? It's just from here to the end of today, and what tomorrow may bring will look different, but how I'm going to experience tomorrow is all about how I start my day, right? What's my outlook? What's my headspace when I start? And I think, again, this is where the staying in touch, following up, making sure things stick that we learn about during this time, right? And that's again part of the coaching approach, right? Where we're circling back. How is this working for you? I think it's invaluable to really stay in the moment, remind yourself of what you got right now to work with, and the positive aspects of that. Keep yourself, in a good place with respect to enough sleep, respect to good nutrition, right? Really, we said before, be kind and patient with yourself, and support yourself the way you can. Keep hydrated. There's so many little things, right? Get up during the day, get some exercise, and now enjoy some fresh air. Put a nice backdrop on when you're on a virtual call, right? That stimulates you in some ways. Of course, I can only encourage anybody right now that's going through this experience with their business and organization, reach out to us. We have a lot of programming to support these kinds of scenarios, and want to touch on more to come here by ways of this webinar series. We have our second series starting next Thursday. We have an expert on our coaching panel on the topic of resilience that I'm thrilled to introduce you next week. And as you see here, we are continuing with mastering focus, true empowerment, learning agility, and team mindset, all as they pertain to you becoming very successful and thriving, working from remote or working from home. We're encouraging and inspiring you to join us again next week. Terry, it was a huge pleasure to have you on here today.
Well, it was my privilege. Thank you so much for inviting me.
we're always excited to have you guys as experts, you know, in short notice come and really bring in some valuable insight and sharing your experiences. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been a really great hour that we were able to spend together. And reach out to us via email with any questions, either to me. My email is petra.russell, petra.russell, russell, @LeggUP, that's LeggUP.com. With any questions regarding our topic today, Terry and I'll be glad to answer anything that shows up for you afterwards. And again, thank you for joining us today. It was a great pleasure to have you with us. And I'm looking forward to greeting you again next week.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.